Thanks for watching this episode of Turning to Him. I invite you to just take a few seconds right now at the beginning and subscribe to this channel so that you can get more videos like this in your feed. Thanks again. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Turning to Him. I'm Zach Batty, and I am joined tonight with Tad Thorley, who's been gracious enough to share his evening with us. How are you doing, Tad?
I'm doing well. Thank you.
Good. Well, again, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule.
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where'd you grow up? Where are you from? That kind of
I
thing.
I grew up in a very small town in southern Utah called Enoch, Utah.
Okay.
And when I was living there, I think the population was less than probably about 2,000 people. And it's near Cedar City, so it's not maybe super rural, but there were times growing up where it was like, go help your friend milk the cow so he can play, right? It's like help your friend with his chores on the farm so that you can have time to play with him, things like that. So, but yeah, I kind of looked around and I realized I work in tech, and there just wasn't a lot in small town Utah. So
Sure.
since then I've kind of moved up to the big city and things like that. But
So
yeah.
what was your mom or dad doing that took the family to Enoch, Utah?
My dad was a school teacher.
Okay.
So and he grew up in Cedar City. Like if you go back to like Brigham Young and the early Saints coming across the plains, a lot of my early ancestors were sent down to this iron mission down in Cedar City. And so like the Thorley family, some of my other ancestors all were sent there and stayed. So it's like if you go, you drive downtown Cedar City, you'll see like the Thorley building. There's like a Thorley music hall at the college there, the university,
Yeah.
things like that. So that's kind of my roots in my hometown.
Do you know why it's Iron County?
Yeah, because it's the iron mission. They thought there are some iron deposits or whatever there. There weren't enough to sustain things long term, but it was part of Brigham Young's thought that we need to have all these resources to be self-sufficient. And so he sent a bunch of people down there because iron was a need, right? Iron
Sure.
was one of the resources that they needed to kind of be self-sufficient. So
I never knew that. But I've always
yeah,
wondered, like, why in the world do we have an Iron County, Utah?
it's because the mission, right, to go to
Yeah.
Iron Mission. There's actually a really great museum on Main Street in Cedar City that has all the details and things like that. So I'll plug
That is
my hometown.
that is cool. Very cool. Okay, so your dad's a school teacher there,
Yeah,
but you grow up and you get to the point where you say, "Hey, this I don't want to stay in a small town anymore."
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so
Like what I wanted to ultimately do for my job, and a lot of things required kind of a bigger city. So
yeah, okay, so you moved to the raging metropolis of Cedar City.
well, Cedar City is just south. I really moved to like Salt Lake area.
Okay,
So
very cool.
and you see it now. I mean, uh, like Point of the Mountain, it's kind of between these two major hubs of Provo and Salt Lake. And so they build everything kind of between, because
Yeah.
those are the two centers of mass kind of for the tech stuff. And so you see tons of stuff.
Oh
Um,
yeah. I mean, Adobe, I am Flash. Of course,
oh
it's
yeah,
not
yeah.
I am
Like
Flash anymore, but
there's new
uh,
buildings all the time going up,
yeah.
new startups or new tech businesses. So,
Okay.
here in this area, it's really thriving. So
Yeah. I assume you went to school for that.
I did.
Uh, Tell us about that. When you leave town, was it hard for your parents for you to leave town?
I think so. Yeah. I know my mom cried and gave me a hug and things like that. I entered University of Utah on a chemistry scholarship,
Whoa.
but ultimately I graduated from Utah State University with a computer science degree. So
How did you go from chemistry to computer science?
it I really enjoyed learning chemistry, but it turned out I didn't enjoy doing chemistry. Um, it After a while, I just realized it wasn't for me, and I didn't enjoy the classes I was going to, except for the classes for my minor, which was computer science.
Okay.
And so ultimately, I'm just like, uh, I should just make my minor my major and do that because that's what I enjoy. So
Yeah. Okay. So why'd you transfer from University of Utah to Utah State?
that's interesting because I actually kind of left University of Utah because I was going to classes, I didn't enjoy it, and I realized I'm like, I don't know why I'm paying for classes that I don't enjoy. So my thinking was I'm just going to go home, save up some money, figure out what to do with my life. And I was actually um, just mowing my parents' front yard, and my old teacher from high school, my I think she taught me trig, was walking by, and she stopped and started talking to me and stuff. And I kind of explained things, and she's like, "Oh, I thought you were going to Utah State." I'm like, "Oh, no, I'm not going to Utah State." And she's like, "I thought you'd always go into like computers or something." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I've kind of thought about it." But something about that conversation kind of stuck in my head where I'm like, "Yeah, why don't I go?" Like something like felt right about that. And so it was just a kind of an odd conversation. I don't know, Providence or something, but yeah, like that's the conversation that's kind of convinced me to switch majors and switch schools.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just, and I don't know why. It was just like her misremembering or misunderstanding put that idea in my head that maybe I want to head up to Logan instead, right?
Sure. Okay. All right. So you finished school at Utah State
Yeah.
with a computer science degree. And then what do you do? Are you right in the job field? Was it
Yeah.
difficult?
I well, not directly. I graduated at one of the worst times to graduate with a computer science degree. Um,
I didn't know there was such a thing.
it
A
was
bad
right
time.
during the dot-com bubble. Like the
Oh,
dot-com bubble had burst, and everyone had lost their job from all that
yeah.
stuff. And
Yeah.
so I graduated and I was applying for jobs fresh out of college, and I was competing with people who had 10 years of experience, right?
Yep.
And I'm just like, oh my gosh, like I'm not going to be able to compete with this. So I I realized that there were some holes in my education, and there's this girl I kind of liked at the time that was in Logan. So I'm like, I'm gonna stick around. I'm gonna get my master's degree, and then I'll figure it out from there. But yeah, I got my degree, I graduated, and that's when I entered kind of the workforce. And you know,
Go from
many
there.
years later, I'm still doing that kind of stuff.
Okay. Anything happened with that young lady?
Um, she's my former wife.
Okay.
So yeah, we got married.
Oh, very nice.
And
For how long were you married?
uh almost 20 years.
Okay. Um, is that something you're comfortable talking about?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
It's before we started, we were talking about grief and loss and the gospel and finding yourself and all those things. And so yeah, for the last over a year and a half, I've been going through this divorce process. And I think it's been really hard, but like we were talking about earlier, there's some things that I think that you learn from hardship that that you're just like, oh, okay, right?
Yeah.
It's it's interesting because I had a series of events. I had my grandpa on my dad's side passed away, and then uh, I, I lost my job. My grandpa on my mom's side passed away. My wife filed for divorce. So there was like a whole lot of things that, like major seeming life events that kind of happened like in succession. And now that when I look back on it, I was like, wow, that was a hard period in my life,
How
right?
close are those three events to each other?
They all happened within about 8 months, probably.
Oh my gosh, that's a
Yeah,
tough 8 months.
yeah.
And let's see if my timeline's correct. You said you've been going through the divorce for about 1.5 years. So did all of this start happening during the COVID lockdown?
Yeah, that's when things probably got hard.
So you've got a pandemic, you
Yeah,
lose a
and
grandfather.
she filed probably as we were, gosh, not always great with dates. Probably after we were like coming out
Okay.
of the pandemic. So
Oh my gosh. Okay. I mean, first of all, tell us about you were married 20 years. Any kids?
yeah, I've got 3 kids.
Okay.
They're fantastic, and one of the probably one of the most heartening things is that she and I both love our children immensely, and we're both trying really hard to make sure that we kind of reduce the impact on our kids, and we both make sure that they both feel loved and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's so key through all of this. Um, okay, so tell us about the beginning of your marriage. And I mean, maybe let's kind of get into that. I assume that, I mean, if you've been married 20 years, there were some good times.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, I think for most people, it wasn't always hard times, right?
Yeah.
Um, so, but yeah, I honestly, I don't think I'm going to get into it a ton just because
Okay.
I know this is going to be public, and so
Yeah.
I'm not going to share things about her or whatever because
Oh, yeah, of course. That's fine.
like
Totally fine.
I still respect her and things like that. So um
Okay, so I mean, maybe let's talk about that because I feel like there are so many divorces out there that aren't civil. So
yeah.
many people would jump at the opportunity to say, "Oh yeah, I got some things to share about my ex-spouse." Why isn't that you?
Um that is that is a great question. Probably um even though we obviously have had our differences lately, um I can remember things too where she helped me through some hard times, right? Like um she helped me through kidney stones, right? Like some of the most intense pain I've ever had. She helped me through a herniated disc.
Yeah.
Um, she helped me. I was really close with my grandma on my dad's side, and I and when my grandma passed away, that was really hard, and she helped me through those things. And so um, it's it's tricky, right?
Hmm.
Because um you know someone pretty well, and so and the other thing is just um there's I can't remember where I first heard it, but somebody said that you can't repent by confessing other people's sins, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so it's like, uh I could think about her flaws and her contributions to why we got divorced, but ultimately that's not going to heal me, right? That's not going to help me. That's just going to um that's going to be a hang up that I'm going to eventually have to get over and get
Mhm.
through. So I might as well do it now, right?
I tell you what, I mean, that alone is worth putting a lot of thought and effort into and letting that idea sink in of it sounds to me like your goal is healing and progress, not revenge at all, not anger or revenge. And that's huge. I think a
Yeah.
lot a lot of people aren't there.
And to be honest, that's not I say these things and it's not like I've mastered them or I
Sure,
even
of
feel
course.
that way every day, right?
Of course.
Um honestly, uh it's um it's been really interesting to look back in retrospect because uh I was just devastated and I was broken and um I was really understanding what grief was about, right? Because um divorce is really hard and I've talked to people who have been divorced and it's kind of nice because they get it where other people just don't, right? Because divorce, it feels like it feels like death. It feels like suddenly someone that was in your life is out of your life and it feels like death but not quite. And you're used to coming home to your kids every day and now you come home to your kids maybe like half the time, right?
Mhm.
And so it's almost like kidnapping or something, like suddenly your kids are out of your life but they're not quite. And um there's so many things that were like common and familiar that are suddenly gone. And grief is loss, right? Grief is I've lost something and I need to process that. And unless you've lost something significant, right, you don't know what grief is like, or you don't know um, that process. It's tricky because a lot of people will there's a lot of like phrases that people will use with you, like, oh, you'll be okay, and all things will pass, and like there's all these things, but a lot of times they don't help. A lot of times it's you you can't look at the future. You have to sit and feel the feelings that you're feeling at that moment, right? you and they talk about the stages of grief, but really you can have any of them. At least that was my experience, and some of these other people I've talked to. Really, you can be angry, and then you can be sad, and then you can be denial, and then you can I forget what all of them are, but they don't necessarily come in any order, and they
Yeah.
don't necessarily go away once you've done them one time through, right?
Yeah, it's a
It
very
takes a
circular,
while. Yeah,
repeatable.
it's not like you go through the circle and then you're done. It's you bounce around and hit
Yeah.
these different things at different times. And what I've learned and I is that you just have to be with people wherever they're at. um I remember there was a point where I was just so distraught, like I was physically ill, like I couldn't even eat. I just felt nauseous. And I had a coworker that reached out to me, and he's like, "Hey, are you doing okay?" And I just broke down. I'm like, I'm not, I am not doing okay. I'm not doing okay at all. I can't even eat right now, right? And so he came to my house and picked me up and drove me, and he's like, "Well, what do you think you could eat?" I'm like, "Well, I can probably eat pancakes. That seems kind of bland, like pancakes without any syrup, right? Just and just something real simple." And I remember he drove me to an IHOP and bought me breakfast, and it was just just like such a nice touch for him. But he sat there and just watched me, and I just ate a bite. I'm like, okay, I'm going to chew this and I'm going to swallow it. Okay, I kind of wait for a moment. Okay, I was able to hold that down, take another bite, and it took me about, oh gosh, an hour to eat a stack of pancakes, right?
Mm-hmm.
But as we were sitting there talking, he's like, because he had gone through divorce and stuff as well. And he's like, sometimes you feel like you're just stuck in the mud, and there's nothing that you can do at that point other than just be stuck, right? And people will come by and be like, "Oh man, you look really dirty." And you're like, "Yeah, I know. I'm stuck in the mud right now, right?" And then people come by and be like, "Oh gosh, look, you're stuck in the mud." And you're like, "Well, yeah, I'm. This is just kind of where I'm stuck right now, right?" And people will come along and say like, "Oh, I've got some great advice for you. You should use soap and like wash yourself off." And you're like, "Well, eventually, yes, but right now I'm just kind of stuck." And I think what people really need at that moment is just someone to be like, "Oh, I see you're stuck in the mud. Why don't I come sit in the mud with you for a moment and just be with you um and just be like, yeah, let me validate whatever you're feeling right now, right?" Because that's one of the hardest things, I think, with all the things people say to you when you're grieving, is it feels like it's invalidating what you're feeling or whatever you're currently experiencing. And um it's just so nice to have someone come along and say like, "Oh, you're really angry right now. That's okay. That's probably whatever stage you're at, and that's probably good for you. That's probably okay for you to be angry, or it's probably okay for you to be sad, because that's part of the grief process, right?" And for someone to just come along and be like, "Yeah, that's rough. Yeah, if I were in your same situation, I would also feel pretty terrible," right? To get those kind of messages, I think, are probably the most helpful for someone that's really going through something like that.
I feel like that is, and I'm not a linguist, but when we talk about mourning with those that mourn,
Oh
I
yeah,
feel like
absolutely.
that's what that's about. Where I'm not, as, as someone who wants to mourn with someone else who's mourning, I'm not trying to solve your problem right now. I
Yeah,
just want to sit
exactly.
in the mud with you for a little bit. And and I feel like at some point, and I'd love your opinion on this. Again, I'm not a linguist, but in my mind, mourn with those that mourn is I'm going to sit in the mud with you. And then comfort those that stand in need of comfort is at some point, we do have to get out of the mud.
Yeah,
And when the time is right, then I'm going to say, to use your metaphor, "Hey, I got a bar of soap here. Do you feel like washing up, or can I help you
yeah.
throw it?" So how did you
The thing
know?
is, a lot of times it's you just go through the process and you get through it yourself, and there's you can't you can't skip steps. There's no shortcuts, right?
Yeah.
It's just it's a process, and I've got to go through it, and nobody can encourage me, nobody can help me, no one can push me through the experience. It's just a process that eventually I'll get through, and I don't know how long it will take, but I'll just eventually get through it, right? And
Yeah.
I can't put expectations on that, right? I can't be like, oh, I'm going to be happy in 2 weeks, because you don't know how long the process is going to take. You don't always know what form it's going to take, right? You just have to say like, okay. And I found that um people can try to help, but you're like, it's not, you can't help me bypass things. I just have to experience the steps, right?
So how?
um but give me a hug, I would love that, right?
Mhm.
Give me some support, give me some empathy, and unfortunately I mostly have to do it myself, and it just
Yeah.
is going to take time.
How did you and how do you keep yourself from permanently being stuck in the mud?
um
Because I'm sure I know I know I
yeah,
I know people who I believe are stuck in the mud. I don't want to put words
yeah,
in your
yeah, yeah,
mouth, but
yeah.
I assume we all know people who, it's
um
been like it's been 15 years and you're still just livid about your ex-wife. Like
right,
15
right,
years is a long time, man. Maybe we should start.
yeah. Honestly, I don't know.
Okay.
I know it worked for me, and I know my process, and I know some other examples of people I've talked to who have kind of gone through some grief. um there's a gal I know who I talked with who lost her son,
Mhm.
and and I mean, it's still hard for her. I mean, it was years ago, but I think parents losing children is a lot harder,
Yeah.
just because you assume that you're going to grow old and outlive them, and you'll see their grandkids and that kind of thing, and uh and that loss is not something you can easily work through. So um but the thing that I think has probably helped me the most, um okay, I can already feel the emotion coming on. I can already feel some tears. So let's see how I do. um and I think we talked about this, is that I at the beginning I was just like devastated, because I was like, my thinking was, the person who knows me the very best in the world has rejected me. And what does that mean about me, right? Like, she knows me better than anybody, and she finds me unbearable. What does that mean, right? What does that mean about me? And that's really hard to kind of wrap your head around. And and then I like took a step back, and I'm like, well, wait, there's someone who knows me better than better than her, and that's me. But like, I don't feel great about me either right now, right? Like, I'm really feeling kind of broken, and I don't know how well I like me either right now. But then you take a step back from that, and you're like, wait, there's some there's somebody that knows you even better than you know yourself, and that's your father, and that's your creator, and that's your brother, who um he's surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, right? And so for me, it was just like, okay, you know me better than me. Can you put me back together? Because I feel kind of broken right now. And for me, that was just, it seemed like people, if you look, right, it feels like people get put in your path when you need them, right? And for me, that looks like I moved into a new ward, and I have a ministering brother who, divorced and remarried. And how he ministers to me is he'll text me and like, hey, let's go for a walk and chat. And I happen to live downhill from the Timpanogos Temple, right? And so our route is we walk up the hill and we loop around the temple and come back. And and that seems to fix me a little bit, just doing that. And just going to the temple every week, right? Every time I go in, I'm like, oh, sit in the celestial room, and you come out and you feel a little bit better. Like I always look at the people coming out of the temple, and I never see anyone that's like really sad or frowning or things like after they've gone to the temple, right? It seems like everybody, regardless of what burden you've taken in, it's been lightened by the time you come out. We'll see how well I do with this story. There was probably several months ago, I came out of the temple, and sometimes it's like the spirit pushes you towards people, right? Like almost as like turns your head and like, hey, that person. And I came out, and there was somebody there, and he looked kind of down, and I just felt like I need to talk to that guy. I need to ask him. I need to, I don't know what's going on, but I just felt compelled to just go approach him and talk to him. And I went up to him and I said, "Oh, hey, how you doing? How's it going? Like, what's going on?" And he was just in tears, right? Like he was, and I'm like, oh wow, this is significant. And so he and I kind of like, went to the side to let other people coming in and out, and he starts telling me his story, which is his marriage was falling apart. He felt like he was having a rough time with his kids, having a rough time with his job. Like, like he starts going through all these things in his life. And he told me that he was just basically, his wife had kicked him out of the house. He wasn't sure where to go or what to do. And he had just been driving around, and he saw the temple in the distance. And he's like, I don't have a current temple recommend, but maybe I can just go and sit in the foyer, and just sitting in the foyer will probably help me at least like collect my thoughts and maybe feel a little bit better, right? And so he came apart, and he's sitting in the foyer, and a few minutes later, that's when I kind of came on the scene, right? And he just starts telling me about like all these things going on in his life, and like his marriage, and like his struggles. I'm like, oh gosh, I relate to that, right? And he's telling me these things, and like every time I'm like, oh wow, yeah, that was me. Like that was me 8 months ago. Oh wow, I've been through that, right? And and he said, like, I don't even know if God cares about me or if he's aware of me. And I'm like, well, I'm here, right? Like, he grabbed a guy who could relate to what you're going through, and he put him in your path, right? Like, and I'm just like, oh man, like, um, maybe all these things I'm going through have some meaning, right? Maybe the things I've learned could be a little bit helpful to some other people. And and he kind of cried and I cried, because I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I don't even know what's happening, but I think I'm an answer to a prayer. And I just gave him a hug and kind of held him for a bit, and then he's like, oh wow, I'm so glad you came along, I'm feeling so much better. And and I kind of went on my way, and he left, and I just got back to my apartment, and I just started to cry, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, you really are paying attention, right? You really do care about us, and you're kind of working behind the scenes to make these interactions. And maybe if you're looking around, and maybe if you're listening, maybe he is kind of having people run into each other and help each other out and things like that. So yeah, that's probably where one of the times I realized, okay, like, this isn't just suffering for suffering's sake. This is, I've learned a few things. Maybe I'm a little more sensitive to other people than I was before. Maybe suffering teaches us empathy. Maybe maybe there's some reasons behind some of this stuff, right? So but yeah, like, just to circle back, I think to get out of the mud, you just have to start looking around and saying, like, well, God doesn't want me to be here, right? He's going to put some stuff in my life to get me out of the situation. Maybe I just need to look around and see it, right? Yeah. Maybe I need to be in the right place. Maybe I need to go to the temple every week and get, go in for a fix up every now and then, just to get the, get my sense of self corrected or whatever, right?
Yeah. And one of the things I love about your story is that here you are struggling with self-worth. The person who knows me the best doesn't like me. I don't like me. However, I know that God loves me, and he knows who I am. And then not only does God love you and love us, but even in that state, he shows you, not only do I love you, but you are an important part of my plan. You're an important part of my plan for that other guy that's struggling.
Yeah.
So it's not just, you're broken right now, but that's okay, I love you, which is true, but it's, you're broken, okay, you're broken right now, but you still have value to the plan. I still need you. You have a place here and you have value here.
And I think probably one of my favorite sections is in the first of the book of Moses, right? Like, it says Moses was caught up to an exceedingly high mountain, and and God and and Moses was, before this, he's like, I'm slow of speech. Are you the guy am I the guy you want for the job? Right. Like, and it's pretty common with a lot of these prophets that are like, really me? Like, am I the one? Surely, there's somebody else.
Yeah,
You know a lot of people, and you know what's going on. And and in that first part of Moses, God shows Moses like everything. He's like, look at what I've created. Look at what I can do. Look at my power. Look at my glory. Look at all these things. And then he turns around to Moses and he says, and you're my son, right? And that really, I think, is the part that really changed Moses's perspective, right? And he said, not only are you my son, but you're in the similitude of my son Jesus, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're my son like Jesus is my son. And you're like, oh wow, that's crazy, right? And then he kind of backs off, and Satan shows up on the scene, and Satan's like, hey, me too, right? Like, worship me, like I'm here, right? And Moses just looks at Satan and he's just like, oh my gosh, you're nothing, right? You are absolutely nothing. I I I have like the clearest perspective right now is that, oh my gosh, like I could barely handle God's glory. And then you show up and you're just like normal mode, right? Like,
yes.
I like, who are you? Like, you're nothing to me, right? And that's such an interesting perspective, I think, that Moses is like, wait a sec, I can see clearly how things are, more clearly than I've possibly seen. Is that okay? God is crazy powerful. I'm his son. And the interesting thing is, he says, Moses, you are my son, and I have a work for you, right? He's like, okay, look what I can do. You're my son, so I'm going to give you a job. And like, man, how capable are you at that point, right? Like, oh man, like, if God's got my back, like, I guess I could do whatever, right? So I think that's kind of the thing that kind of fixes our perspective, right? Is sometimes we lose track of that, and we need like a reset, right? And Moses went up to the mountain. For me, I go up the hill to the temple, right?
Yeah.
And I don't get quite the same experience that Moses did, but it helps, right?
Sure. Wow. Well, Pat, I really appreciate you being so vulnerable and sharing this. I feel like there are a lot of people out there that are mourning, and whether it's divorce, whether it's the loss of a loved one, whether it's their life is crumbling around them because they lost their job, or I mean, you had all three of those things happen just
Yeah.
And I think that, like you said, of just staying close to your Heavenly Father and getting a reset and understanding your role in life and in the eternities. That's huge. I mean, the only way to get through any of these things is with the Savior and staying close to him.
Yeah, because like I said, he's the only one that gets it, really, right? Like when I said, oh, this person who's other people who haven't experienced divorce don't really get it, like people who have experienced divorce, right? And and that's kind of I think he's the ultimate I get it person, right?
Yeah. Well, do you think, just kind of in closing,
Yeah.
are you closer to your Savior now than you were 18 months ago? 24 months
I
ago?
I hope so. I would like to think so. Yeah. I think it's yeah, really that's when these big life things happen, it's they always seem like decision points, right? Like you're like, okay, I'm gonna stick with it. I'm gonna stay the course. Am I gonna try something else? Right? Like, because it can really feel like um because you can like I can look back and I could be like, I went to church every week, like I paid my tithing. Why am I getting a divorce? Like this seems unfair. This seems like okay, like you promised me blessings, but I don't feel very blessed right now, right? Like
Yeah, yeah.
I don't feel like you're even like caring about my situation. Um and it's really tricky. Um so I think it's I forget I forget which author. Um but they say that the three what are they? There's three parts there. Oh, the three P's. There's three P's to depression, right? Is that you think the negative things are personal, meaning that you're the only one that's kind of experiencing this, and then you and then it feels pervasive, meaning like it feels like it's coloring every aspect of your life, right? That like it's just kind of everywhere, and it feels permanent, right? Where you can't that nothing you can do is going to escape this feeling, right? And so people that are really severely depressed feel like these things are permanent, pervasive, and personal. And it's really interesting to see um, how God talked to Joseph Smith in Liberty Jail, because you can see Joseph Smith is like, why are these things happening to me? And it's feeling very personal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, God, why are you ignoring me? Where, the whole, why is the
Oh, yeah.
pavilion covering your hiding place? Or I forget the exact wording. And um and then it's like, he's like, I'm stuck here in jail, right? Like, and my enemies are laughing. Um and God comes to him and he says, okay, first of all, this has happened before and it's going to happen again. Like, this is something that just prophets, people that follow me, sometimes experience, right? And so God's like, okay, this isn't personal. So it's kind of part of the whole package, right? And
Yeah.
so he comes in and he kind of corrects that personal thing, and then he's like, okay, it's not pervasive. Like, not everyone hates you. I mean, you still have friends and family and people that support you and love you. So it's not pervasive, right? And then he says, and this will be for a small moment, right? And um and so it's not permanent, right? And so I think it's very easy for us to kind of fall into those depression things, or those kind of that mode of thinking. But God's like, okay, if you'll look to me and you'll listen, I can fix your thinking. Like, and I want to do a quick caveat here. Like, I think if you need medication for getting over depression or all sorts of things, mental illness, right? Like, God's not gonna, you might need to have more than prayer to get through your depression or whatever, right?
But I think that's
So
that's the beginning of it, right? Is opening up that communication so that God can say, hey, you need to go talk to somebody. So the Spirit can prompt you to say, hey, maybe you need to make a phone call.
But right, like, if you're like, okay, I'm gonna humble myself, I'm gonna listen, what do I need to know right now, right? Help me out, right? And I think God at that moment with Joseph Smith was maybe a little bit like, okay, can I give you a little bit of humility too? Because, the Son of Man has descended below all of this, right? Are you greater than he? And it's like, okay, right, let me correct your perspectives a little bit. And it's like, okay, that's hard, that's really hard. But if you kind of turn and look around and you're like, this is real hard and I don't get it and I don't understand, but I'm going to hope that you're going to help me out, right? Then I think it helps. I think it works out. But it's sure rough in the, like, I don't fault people who are in hard times that say like, I can't do this, I don't get it, I don't know why, right? Because you can't know why, right? Like, I'm a mortal person with a mortal brain, and I just know that it's real painful and real hard.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe you have a divine perspective and all sorts of things, but oh man, like, my mortality and my simple whatever is really, really struggling right now. Right.
Yeah. Well, and like you said at the very beginning, you don't always feel celestial. You didn't say that. What you said was, I said, that's a great perspective to have. And you humbly said, well, I don't have this perspective all the time.
Yeah.
Right? And I think we have to give ourselves that license. I mean, there's one thing to have, unhealthy emotional swings. That aside, I think we have to give ourselves permission to have a bad day and to say, man, today I was feeling pretty telestial. Today I was angry and I was mad at that person. I'm mad at God. I'm mad. You have to give yourself license to do that and to make progress, and that through that, still communicating openly with your Heavenly Father. Hey, today sucked. Today was a punch in the gut and I'm mad. Yeah. And quite frankly, I'm a little bit mad at you.
Yeah. But and it could be not just this day, it could be this week, it could be this month.
Yeah.
Right. Like, it's.
Yeah. And that understanding, just like the stages of grief aren't a linear one-time path, neither are our emotions. We don't have one day and then every day gets better and better and better till we're all healed. That's not how it works. It's a one step forward, 3 steps back, 4 steps forward, a half step back journey that everybody goes through. And if you beat yourself up for doing that, I don't think that's healthy. I don't think that's how progress is made. Real progress is made. So, well, again, Tad, thank you so much for sharing this. I feel like there are a lot of people out there that are in your boat, and they're
Yeah.
either, they're a
Well,
couple months behind you, or they're a couple months ahead of you, or wherever. Not that it's a linear thing, but
yeah. But yeah, it's hard. It is hard.
we'll stick together. We'll mourn with those who need mourning.
Yeah.
So
I hope that I've learned some insight, and something I've shared can help somebody else, because if not, then it's just plain suffering, and that stinks. Right. So
yeah, no, we're all helping each other out somehow. So I know that for sure. Um, it'll take me just a couple days to edit this and to put it online. It actually might take a week or two, but
okay.
I'll let you know when it's done, and I'll send out the link to you.
Okay.
Man, I really appreciate it. I think I've said it 3 times already, but I'll say it one more time. I think there are a lot of people in your situation, and it's so helpful to know that other people are in your situation.
Yeah. It's honestly, it's really hard to be divorced in this church. It's really hard to be single.
Yeah.
For me, it's really hard to be in the in between. Like, I'm technically not quite divorced yet. Like, it's still the papers are signed, they're submitted to a judge, and I still am waiting for him to say, like, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
you're done, right? And because you're not single, right? Like, I'm technically, if I date, I'm adultering,
Right.
I'm not allowed to do the single activities, and I don't know if I'm in a good space to do them. But then you're not married either, right? And the married people, you're very invisible to the married people, to be honest. Like, they don't think, oh, there's a single person in my ward, I'll invite them over to do board games. Or there's a single person in my ward, I'll socialize with them. I think there's an assumption that they'll find some single activities to do. It's like, well, no, I don't have single activities as an option. So
Yeah.
I'm stuck in limbo, and I wish someone would, throw me a bone. I wish that.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that, because I've never thought about that. And you're right. You just assume they're not going to want to hang out with a bunch of marrieds. Like, they're going to want to hang out with a bunch of singles.
Yeah.
I'm going to think about the people in my ward now and see.
But maybe that's not an option for them. Or maybe
they just don't want to. Maybe they don't want to date.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, gosh, like, it's something you kind of got to ease back into. Right?
Sure.
It's not easy. So
yeah, I'm glad you said that. I'm gonna review my actions now. That's worth thinking about.
yeah. An interesting, and it's interesting because a lot of times I'm going to put in a plug for all the divorced men that I know now, that I seem to be running into more and more divorced men that have kind of left the church, and they're just like, man, it was rough, and I didn't feel like I fit anywhere, so I kind of quit going. And I'm like, that stinks, but I get it. Right. And it's just simple things like, I was talking to somebody, and he was asked to do a calling, and he turned it down. And he's like, it's actually, unfortunately, a married person's calling. And I was like, I don't know, like, what do you mean? Like, and he's like, well, it's a calling where I would have to go to meetings early in the morning on Sundays. And I can't find a babysitter for my kids early in the morning on Sundays. I'm a single parent. That's just really tricky to do. So somebody with a spouse that can leave their spouse with the kids when they go to that meeting, whatever, right? That's kind of what they expect out of that calling. And that's just not me, unfortunately. And they don't consider that I'm a single parent that can't find a babysitter on a Sunday morning, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's interesting that the church has a lot more singles in it now than they've ever had before. And I think they're going to have to start rethinking how do we help these single people fit, right? Like the single person in a family ward, how do they fit in?
Yeah. Yeah. And how everybody needs to be needed, right? I mean, wasn't
Yeah.
it President Hinckley that said everybody needs three things: a
Friend, a
friend,
calling, and nourished by the good word of God.
yeah. Everybody needs to know that they're needed.
Yeah.
So how do
And
we make sure that everybody in each different walk of life knows that not only that they belong here, not only that there's a place here for them, but that they're needed.
yeah. And it's I've become acutely aware of how much the church assumes pairs of people, right? Because it's like it's super easy for the bishop to be like, okay, I'm going to get husband to give the opening prayer and wife to give the closing prayer in sacrament meeting, right? Or it's super easy for me to call husband and wife to be the two speakers in sacrament next week, right? Just little things like that. Where it's like, oh, I've got this unit of husband and wife that I can assign to this thing. And then you're like, well, I'm not a husband and wife. I'm just me, right?
Yeah.
Where do I fit? It's like, I don't know. Right?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a good reminder for anybody in any type of leadership position or any position to just remember the people that are in a different life space than you are.
Yeah.
Right? Because I mean, both of us know that there is a space for everybody. There is a space for everybody, and everybody is needed. And yeah, just that human shortcoming.
Yeah.
Just assuming that everybody's in your same life situation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's really interesting. Like, it's been a couple months ago. I saw this woman in my ward come in. She came in late, and she's got kind of her kids with her. And once they sit down, and she's like fixing their hair still and like doing that thing. And then she's like grabbing, some granola bars or whatever out of her purse to like hand out to the kids. And I'm like, oh, I know what happened is she's got to get up. She's got to manage all of her kids and get them all to church. And this morning, the kids weren't going for it. And so she had to, she had to wrangle them as best she could. And their hair wasn't quite done yet. And they missed breakfast because, they're running late. And so she's sitting in the back of the church feeling sad because she's like, man, I can't even
feeling like
I can't even get to church on time, and my kids don't look great, and I didn't give them breakfast, and I'm beating myself up because life's rough. And And it's just like, now I look at those people, I'm like, man, they're living on hard mode. I look at the people that came early and sat in the pews and, are sitting by their spouse and they're lovey-dovey and whatever. And they're kind of on easy mode, right? To get to sacrament. And those of us sitting in the back, it was hard mode for us to even get here, but we're here, right? And so there's a degree of difficulty that I don't think is always appreciated.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, to that point of, we don't know who's in easy mode and hard mode.
Right.
We don't know that mom and dad and 6 kids that are sitting in the second row and they're all perfect braided. We don't know that, oh, actually, that guy's business partner just went to jail for embezzling. He lost his career.
He's out of a job and he's like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah. And actually, we don't know because his wife's actually a heroin addict. You know what I mean? Like, we don't know anything, but I agree with you that, and maybe that's the whole point of, I don't know if it was Elder Eyring, may have been Elder Eyring, who said basically, if every time you meet somebody, you assume that they're going through a crisis, you'll be right 50% of the time.
Right. Yeah.
And just like, man, so just the idea of, hey, look, whether you're the person who's pulling out grilled cheese sandwiches in the back of the chapel and your kids' pigtails are like wonky and whatever, or you're the person who everybody thinks, man, they've got it all together. I wish my life was, you have no idea what hard is. Well, we don't know, man. Everybody is potentially going through something. And if you happen to be one of the 50% that isn't going through something right now, make your life a little easier for the guy next to you. You know what I mean? Sure. Like, offer to hold the PB&J if you can.